There are places in this world that seem untouched by time, hidden away from civilization and shrouded in secrecy. Islands that few have ever seen, and even fewer have dared to explore. These are places where nature reigns supreme, where history whispers through the ruins of forgotten settlements, and where the unknown still lingers in the air. Some are forbidden by law, others by nature itself. But one thing remains certain: they are some of the most mysterious places on Earth. One such place is Bouvet Island, a lonely, ice-covered landmass in the South Atlantic Ocean. It is often called the most remote island on Earth, situated over 1,000 miles from the nearest landmass, Antarctica. This desolate volcanic island, covered almost entirely in glaciers, is uninhabited, yet it has a story that defies explanation. In 1964, a British expedition to Bouvet Island made a baffling discovery. On a small stretch of rocky shoreline, they found something that shouldn't have been there: an abandoned lifeboat, partially buried in the ice. There were no markings, no signs of ownership, and no explanation for how it had arrived on the island. The nearest shipping lanes were hundreds of miles away, and no records existed of any shipwreck or missing vessel in the area. The boat was empty, with no human remains, no footprints leading away, and no supplies that could hint at its origin. Even more unsettling was the fact that when another expedition returned to the site 2 years later, the boat had vanished without a trace. Had someone returned for it? Had it been swallowed by the ice? Or had it never really been there in the first place? To this day, no one knows who left the lifeboat on Bouvet Island, or what happened to the person or people who may have been aboard. It remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of maritime history. But Bouvet is just the beginning. There are islands out there that hold even darker secrets. Places like North Sentinel Island, where an uncontacted tribe has lived for thousands of years, violently resisting any attempt at outside interaction. Or the eerie ruins of Hashima Island, once a bustling metropolis, now an abandoned ghost town reclaimed by the sea. And then there are the islands that seem to appear and disappear at will, their existence debated by sailors and historians alike. One such island, Bermeja, was marked on maps for centuries, believed to be located off the coast of Mexico. But when modern satellite imaging and extensive naval searches attempted to locate it, the island was nowhere to be found. Had it sunk beneath the waves, or had it simply never existed? Some believe it was intentionally erased from maps to hide something far more sinister. And what about the mysterious case of High Brazil, a phantom island said to appear off the coast of Ireland every 7 years before vanishing into the mist? Legends speak of an advanced civilization living there, a place of knowledge and wonder that sailors swore they had seen but could never reach. Even as late as the 19th century, maps still included High Brazil, despite its physical absence from the real world. As we journey deeper into these mysteries, prepare to uncover the forbidden, the unexplored, and the impossible. Some of these islands are closed off to the world by strict government orders, others by the sheer brutality of nature itself. But all of them share one thing in common: they are places humanity was never meant to tread. Sit back, relax, and let's set sail into the unknown. The journey has just begun. Far away from civilization, deep within the vast and unforgiving Pacific Ocean, lies an island that seems frozen in time. It is a place where prehistoric creatures still roam, untouched by the outside world. This island, known as Sentinel Rock, has remained one of the most mysterious and uncharted territories on the planet. Though Sentinel Rock is not widely known, its eerie existence has fueled myths and speculation for centuries. It is said to be a remnant of a lost world, where creatures long thought extinct continue to thrive in isolation. Sailors first reported strange sightings of the island in the 18th century. Some claim to have seen enormous bird-like creatures soaring above its jagged cliffs. Others spoke of dense, uncharted jungles filled with towering reptiles. Yet, despite these accounts, no official maps recorded its location, and those who sought it out often never returned. It became one of the Pacific's greatest ghost stories, a place that seemed to exist only in whispers. Then, in the late 20th century, satellite images captured something strange, a landmass previously uncharted, with dense green forests and rugged peaks. Researchers debated whether this could be the fabled Sentinel Rock. Expedition teams were assembled, eager to uncover the truth, but none successfully landed. Violent storms and treacherous waters kept the island out of reach, as if nature itself was guarding its secrets. One of the most mysterious reports comes from a fishing vessel in the 1990s. The crew claimed to have drifted dangerously close to Sentinel Rock's shore during a storm. As the mist cleared, they saw something moving in the trees, something massive. It wasn't a bird, nor a mammal, but something entirely unknown. Before they could investigate further, their radio went silent, and their compasses spun wildly. In sheer terror, they abandoned their search and turned away, forever haunted by what they saw. What makes Sentinel Rock so elusive? Some believe it's an optical illusion, an island that appears only under certain conditions. Others argue that it's a forbidden place, protected by forces beyond human comprehension. The legends say that those who step foot on its shores never return, not because they are lost, but because they are consumed by the island itself. If Sentinel Rock exists, it challenges everything we know about the natural world. It suggests that pockets of prehistoric life could still remain, hidden away from the ever-expanding reach of humanity. The mystery remains unsolved, and until the day someone sets foot on its shores and lives to tell the tale, it will remain one of the world's greatest enigmas. As we continue our journey into the world's most isolated and forbidden islands, prepare to uncover even more lost worlds, forgotten civilizations, and places where time itself seems to stand still. Some islands do not want to be found, and perhaps we are never meant to find them. North Sentinel Island lies in the Andaman Sea, just west of the southern tip of Myanmar, and yet it may as well be on another planet. This tiny speck of land, just about the size of Manhattan, is home to one of the last completely uncontacted tribes on Earth, the Sentinelese. Unlike most islands, whose dangers lie in harsh terrain or treacherous weather, North Sentinel's greatest threat is human, or rather, the humans who inhabit it. The Sentinelese have lived in complete isolation for thousands of years. No one knows exactly how long they've called the island home, but archaeological evidence suggests their ancestors may have arrived more than 60,000 years ago. Since then, they've had virtually no contact with the outside world, and they intend to keep it that way. Every attempt to make contact has been met with aggression. Arrows, spears, and stones rain down on any boat or helicopter that dares to approach. The Sentinelese are not interested in diplomacy. They want to be left alone, and they've made that abundantly clear. In 2006, 2 fishermen strayed too close to the island and were killed almost immediately. Their bodies were never recovered. Even the Indian government, which has jurisdiction over the island, has declared it off limits. A 3-mile exclusion zone surrounds it, enforced by naval patrols. No journalists, no researchers, no tourists. The Sentinelese live untouched by modern civilization, and any attempt to change that has ended in failure or death. But what makes North Sentinel so unique isn't just its people. It's the way it holds a mirror up to the rest of the world. In an era of satellites and smartphones, a tribe still lives with no knowledge of the modern world, no writing, no electricity, No metal tools. They fish, they hunt, they build fires. They live as humans did tens of thousands of years ago. And they thrive. Anthropologists believe the Sentinelese are genetically distinct from other nearby tribes. Their language is completely unrelated to any known Andamanese dialect. We don't even know what they call themselves. Every piece of information we have about them comes from distant observation, because any attempt to get close has resulted in hostility. One of the most well-known incidents occurred in 2018 when an American missionary attempted to illegally visit the island to convert the Sentinelese to Christianity. He paid local fishermen to smuggle him near the shore. On his first approach, he shouted biblical phrases and offered gifts. The tribe fired arrows at him. Undeterred, he returned the next day and was never seen alive again. The fisherman who brought him later saw his body being dragged along the beach. This tragedy reignited the debate over how best to handle uncontacted peoples. Should we respect their desire for isolation, or should we attempt to integrate them for their own safety? The consensus among anthropologists and human rights groups is clear. Leave them alone. Contact would almost certainly result in disaster, not just for outsiders, but for the Sentinelese themselves. With no immunity to modern diseases, even a common cold could decimate their population. It's a reminder that not every corner of the world has been conquered, and not every people wants to be part of the global community. Some stories are meant to be left untold. Some islands are meant to remain forbidden. As we continue our journey through the world's most isolated places, we move next to an island abandoned by man, but not forgotten by nature. A place where concrete and steel now crumble under vines and salt. The ghosts of industry whisper through empty corridors, and the sea slowly reclaims what was once hailed as a modern marvel. Off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, there's an island that looks like something out of a dystopian film, an eerie silhouette of collapsed buildings, rusted steel, and crumbling concrete. This is Hashima Island, better known as Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island. Once the site of intense industrial activity, it now sits empty, surrounded by waves and silence, a ghost city slowly eroding back into the sea. Hashima's story is one of extreme transformation. In the early 20th century, it was a hub of coal mining operations, owned by the Mitsubishi Corporation. As Japan industrialized, the demand for coal skyrocketed. The tiny island was expanded with concrete and seawalls, and soon it became one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Thousands of workers and their families lived in massive apartment complexes stacked on top of each other, surrounded by smokestacks, machinery, and the constant hum of industrial life. But life on Hashima wasn't easy. The island was battered by typhoons, confined by narrow walkways, and completely devoid of natural greenery. Everything had to be imported: food, water, even soil. The only thing abundant was concrete. Children played on rooftops, workers descended deep into dangerous mines, and the ocean served as both boundary and barrier. Yet despite its challenges, it thrived. Schools, shops, cinemas, and hospitals were all squeezed into this compact labyrinth of urban life. Then, as quickly as it had risen, it began to fall. By the 1970s, petroleum began to replace coal, and Hashima's mines were no longer profitable. Mitsubishi shut down operations in 1974, and in just a few months, everyone was gone. Families left their homes behind, abandoning furniture, clothes, and even meals half-eaten on tables. The island was sealed off, left to decay in silence. For decades, Hashima remained off-limits, a concrete husk fading in the salt and sun. Nature began to reclaim the island. Seabirds nested in broken windows. Ivy crept over collapsing walls. Floors gave way to rot, and stairwells opened into darkness. The sounds of laughter and labor were replaced by the whisper of wind and waves. Urban explorers who managed to sneak onto the island described it as a time capsule. Inside the buildings, everything was eerily frozen, as if life had simply paused. Movie posters from the 60s still clung to walls. Desks were cluttered with forgotten papers. Dust-coated toys sat in corners. It was a haunting snapshot of a world left behind. Hashima's darker side, however, lies beneath the surface. During World War II, the island became a site of forced labor. Thousands of Korean and Chinese prisoners were brought here to work under brutal conditions, victims of exhaustion, accidents, or malnutrition. For decades, this chapter of the island's history was suppressed. Only in recent years has it been acknowledged, and it remains a source of tension and unresolved trauma. In 2009, the island was partially reopened to the public. Tourists can now visit limited areas, walking along fenced paths and peering into the ruins. In 2015, it was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, though not without controversy over its wartime legacy. Hashima Island stands as a monument to ambition, resilience, and decay. It tells the story of a society built on industry, abandoned by progress, and haunted by memory. A place where nature and human creation clash, and where silence speaks louder than any machine. As we move forward, we leave behind the rusted skeleton of Hashima and travel to an island that has captured the imagination of adventurers and storytellers for centuries. A place so difficult to reach and so dangerous to explore that even seasoned explorers hesitate. Next, we arrive at an island where the land itself is alive, shifting, steaming, and rumbling with energy from deep below the earth. Tucked away in the Pacific Ring of Fire is an island that breathes, literally. White Island, or Wakari, as it is known by the Maori people, is New Zealand's most active volcano and one of the most otherworldly places on the planet. Its barren, sulfur-stained landscape rises out of the sea like a forgotten world, covered in steaming vents, acidic lakes, and churning mud pools. It is as hostile as it is captivating, a place where the earth seems to warn visitors with every breath it exhales. White Island is not forbidden by government decree, but by its very nature. To step onto Wakari is to walk on the edge of catastrophe. There is no safety here, just a constant reminder that the earth is alive beneath your feet. Scientists estimate that the island has been active for over 150,000 years. In modern times, it has been the site of near-continuous volcanic activity, making it both a fascinating research subject and a dangerous destination. Tourists once visited the island regularly. Boats would ferry passengers from the mainland, and guided tours would bring them close to bubbling geothermal features. Visitors donned gas masks to shield themselves from toxic fumes, walking carefully along narrow paths just meters from acidic craters and unstable slopes. The experience was surreal, a front-row seat to nature's raw power. But on December 9, 2019, the volcano erupted without warning. At 2:11 p.m., a column of ash, steam, and superheated gas exploded into the sky. Dozens of tourists were on the island at the time. Some managed to escape, but many were trapped. 22 people died, and many others were severely burned. It was one of the deadliest volcanic disasters in recent history. The tragedy raised difficult questions about risk, responsibility, and the price of curiosity. Should tours have been allowed in such a volatile environment? Could the eruption have been predicted? Scientists had noted elevated activity in the days leading up to the event, but no one expected a sudden, violent eruption. The island gave no clear signal until it was too late. Since the disaster, White Island has been closed to the public. Helicopters still fly overhead, but no one sets foot on its shores. The landscape remains scorched and scarred, a haunting reminder of the forces at work beneath the surface. In Maori legend, Wakari was once a sacred place, a land of gods and fire. Today, that reverence feels more appropriate than ever. Yet, there is something about White Island that continues to draw interest. Perhaps it's the stark contrast between its deadly beauty and its scientific importance. The island offers a rare glimpse into the Earth's interior, a place where tectonic plates collide and energy builds until it explodes. For geologists, it is a living laboratory. For storytellers, it is a modern myth in the making. There are few places on Earth where you can see, hear, and feel the planet in motion. Wakari is one of them. It hisses, groans, and pulses with life. It demands respect, and it reminds us of our place in the natural world, not above it, but within it. We are fragile, temporary, and sometimes we forget that. As we leave the volatile shores of White Island behind, we journey next to a place even more remote, a place encased in ice, where the wind never stops, and where the only visitors are scientists braving some of the harshest conditions on Earth, an island that holds secrets locked beneath frozen ground and questions that may never be answered. There's an island so far removed from the rhythms of human life that it might as well exist on another planet. Welcome to Antarctica's Snow Hill Island, a remote, frozen landmass locked in by pack ice for most of the year. Here, temperatures plummet well below freezing, winds roar without end, and the silence is broken only by the distant crack of shifting glaciers or the call of emperor penguins. Few people have ever set foot here. Fewer still have spent more than a few fleeting hours on its barren shores. Snow Hill Island isn't forbidden by decree, but by sheer inaccessibility. Surrounded by unpredictable sea ice, it remains unreachable by ordinary ships for most of the year. Only reinforced icebreakers or helicopters can occasionally reach it, and even then, only when conditions are right. For decades, this island remained a blank space on the map, shrouded by snowstorms and guarded by nature's extremes. What makes Snow Hill Island so extraordinary isn't just its climate, but what lies hidden beneath the ice. In the early 20th century, a team of Swedish explorers braved the elements to search the island, not for treasure, but for something older: fossils. They were stunned by what they found. Preserved deep in the icy sediment were the remains of ancient reptiles, dinosaurs, marine lizards, and long-extinct flora. These weren't just scattered bones, but entire skeletons, frozen in time by the Antarctic cold. The discovery changed everything. It suggested that Antarctica was once lush, teeming with life, a land of forests, rivers, and massive beasts. A continent now buried in ice was once green. But how and when? Snow Hill Island became a key to that mystery. Paleontologists have returned in recent decades, enduring brutal weather to continue the excavation. The work is painstaking and slow, hours of digging for just a glimpse of ancient bone. Yet each trip uncovers new clues: feathered dinosaurs that hint at a link between birds and reptiles, fish species once native to warm seas, and plant fossils that suggest a temperate climate millions of years ago. But Snow Hill isn't just about the past. Some believe it could hold secrets about the future. Beneath its surface lies ancient permafrost, frozen layers of earth that haven't thawed for tens of thousands of years. Locked inside are gases, methane, carbon dioxide, and microbes that haven't seen the light of day since mammoths walked the earth. Scientists worry that as the planet warms, parts of Snow Hill and places like it may begin to thaw, releasing these ancient elements back into the atmosphere. Could this trigger new changes to the climate? Are there diseases, long dormant, waiting to reawaken? there's also the mystery of what lies further below. Satellite imagery and ice-penetrating radar have detected strange formations under the surface, structures that don't match natural patterns. Some researchers speculate these could be unusual geological features. Others whisper about more controversial ideas: hidden cave systems, underground lakes, or even evidence of ancient civilizations lost beneath the Antarctic ice. While most dismiss these ideas as fringe speculation, they remain tantalizing. After all, there is still so much we don't know about the frozen continent. Snow Hill Island remains a place of paradox. It is at once a graveyard of the ancient world and a beacon for scientific discovery. A place where the planet's past and future converge beneath layers of snow and time. It demands endurance, patience, and a willingness to step beyond the edge of the known world. As we leave the icy silence of Snow Hill behind, our next destination couldn't be more different. We head now to the heart of the Indian Ocean, to an island that was once a paradise and is now forbidden for reasons darker than nature, a place where human intervention collided with geopolitics and where an entire population was forced to vanish. In the middle of the Indian Ocean lies an island with turquoise waters, palm-lined beaches, and a painful silence. Diego Garcia may look like paradise, but behind its serene facade is a story of displacement, secrecy, and power. Once home to hundreds of families, today it stands as one of the most restricted and controversial islands on Earth. For centuries, Diego Garcia was inhabited by the Chagosians, descendants of African slaves and Indian laborers brought there by the French and later the British. They lived simple lives, fishing, farming, and working on coconut plantations. The island, part of the Chagos archipelago, was a world unto itself, isolated but thriving. Generations of families were born there, with their own language, music, and customs. Then, in the 1960s, everything changed. As the Cold War escalated, the United States and the United Kingdom struck a deal. Diego Garcia, they decided, was the perfect location for a strategic military base, an unsinkable aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. The Chagosians, however, were a problem. So between 1968 and 1973, they were forcibly removed. Under orders from the British government, the island's inhabitants were rounded up and exiled to Mauritius and the Seychelles. Many were told they were going on vacation. Others were simply barred from returning after trips to the mainland. Families were separated, pets were exterminated, homes were abandoned, and just like that, a culture was uprooted and erased. Since then, Diego Garcia has remained under strict military control. The U.S. Navy and Air Force operate from the island, which now hosts radar installations, satellite tracking stations, and massive airstrips. It played a key role during the Gulf War, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and various intelligence operations. Satellite images reveal fuel storage facilities, bunkers, and docking stations, but no civilians. What happens on Diego Garcia is largely unknown. It's a place that doesn't welcome outsiders, no journalists, no tourists. Even the exiled Chagosians are denied the right to return. Legal battles have raged for decades, with human rights groups calling for justice and restoration. In 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that the UK must return the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. The United Nations General Assembly backed the decision, but the UK, and by extension the US, has refused. The secrecy surrounding Diego Garcia has fueled countless theories. Some believe it's used for black site detention. Others claim it houses advanced surveillance technology or acts as a launch site for drones and spy planes. There's no proof of these claims. But then again, access is tightly controlled. For most of the world, Diego Garcia might as well not exist. And yet, the legacy of the island's past lingers. In exile, the Chagosian people continue to fight for recognition. Many live in poverty, disconnected from their homeland and grieving for what was lost. They hold on to fading memories of music played under coconut trees, of sea breezes and quiet beaches. They teach their children about a home they may never see. Diego Garcia is a forbidden island not because of nature, but because of politics. It represents a different kind of isolation, one imposed by governments, sustained by power, and justified by security. It's a reminder that not all forbidden places are empty. Some are simply silenced. As we leave Diego Garcia behind, we head next to a place where myth and reality blur. An island surrounded by swirling legends, where travelers have vanished and maps have lied. A phantom island whose very existence has been debated for centuries. Join us in Part 8 as we uncover the mystery of the island that appears, then disappears. There are places that exist only in memory, or perhaps in mistake. Islands that appeared on maps for centuries, logged by explorers, spoken of by sailors, and yet when searched for, are nowhere to be found. One of the most enduring of these mysteries is the legend of High Brazil. Located off the western coast of Ireland, High Brazil was long believed to be a real island. It appeared on nautical charts as early as 1325 and remained on maps for over 500 years. Sailors described it as a land shrouded in mist, visible only once every 7 years. When it did appear, they said, it glowed with golden light. Some claimed it was inhabited by an advanced civilization, keepers of ancient knowledge, perhaps even the origin of strange technologies and unexplained phenomena. Despite many attempts to reach High Brazil, no one ever succeeded. Expeditions launched from England, Ireland, and even further abroad reported sightings from afar, but were inevitably swallowed by fog or redirected by storm. What they thought they saw would vanish before they could ever make landfall. Still, the legend persisted. So did its place on maps, sometimes near the Aran Islands, other times closer to Iceland, but always just beyond reach. The idea of a phantom island wasn't unique to High Brazil. Throughout history, there have been countless instances of cartographic mysteries, land masses drawn by mistake or through misinterpretation, remaining in global atlases for decades. Some were simply errors, low-lying reefs mistaken for islands or clouds on the horizon, misjudged by early navigators. But others, like High Brazil, came with rich oral traditions and overlapping stories too consistent to ignore. One such tale involved a Captain John Nisbet, who in 1674 claimed to have not only seen High Brazil, but landed there. According to the account, he and his crew encountered tall, pale people in fine robes who spoke a strange but melodic language. The islanders provided them with supplies and shared visions of future events. Some believe this tale to be fabrication, while others suggest it's a retelling of an older myth dressed in seafaring clothing. The stories often overlap with other maritime legends, of Atlantis, of Lemuria, of Mu, lost lands that once existed but sank beneath the sea after some cataclysm. In modern times, some believe these stories are subconscious recollections of real ancient disasters, like rising sea levels swallowing coastal civilizations at the end of the Ice Age. In this interpretation, High Brazil isn't a fantasy, but a memory passed down and twisted over centuries. In the 1800s, High Brazil began to disappear from maps. As charting became more precise and scientific methods replaced myth, cartographers removed the island from records. But the story didn't fade. In the 20th century, High Brazil surfaced in an unexpected place. A declassified U.S. Air Force document connected to the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident in England. One of the witnesses, under hypnosis, claimed he had received a message in binary code. When later decoded, the message included coordinates pointing to the location where High Brazil had once been marked. Coincidence? Maybe. But to those who believe, it was another piece in the puzzle. Today, the mystery of High Brazil endures not as a place, but as a symbol of how myth, memory, and misunderstanding can become something more. Whether it was ever real or not seems almost irrelevant. The legend has embedded itself into culture, into maps, and into our collective imagination. In some ways, that's more powerful than any physical landmass. Some say High Brazil was never an island at all, but a reflection, a mirage caused by rare atmospheric conditions, creating the illusion of land just beyond the sea. Others believe it may still exist, hidden by technology, protected by secrecy, or shielded by dimensions we do not yet understand. Like a dream you almost remember, it lingers. As we sail away from High Brazil, we move toward our final two destinations, one encased in military secrecy, and the other so inhospitable that no one dares claim it. Islands where danger and isolation are absolute, and the question isn't why no one lives there, it's how anyone ever could. Deep in the Pacific Ocean lies a place that few people have heard of, and even fewer have ever seen. Johnston Atoll is a small, flat island, a speck of land surrounded by an endless horizon of blue. But for decades, it has served as one of the most secretive and heavily guarded locations on Earth. Not because of its natural environment, but because of what humanity did there. Johnston Atoll is not home to a native population. It never was. It has no permanent residents, no villages, no towns. But it has played host to some of the most sensitive military operations in modern history. For much of the 20th century, this tiny island was used by the United States as a testing ground, a storage site, and a launch pad for both innovation and destruction. During the height of the Cold War, Johnston Atoll was the site of high-altitude nuclear tests. In the early 1960s, Operation Fishbowl was carried out here, involving the detonation of nuclear warheads in space. The purpose was to study the effects of nuclear explosions above the Earth's atmosphere, how they would disrupt electronics, satellite communication, and the magnetic field. The tests created massive artificial auroras that lit up the sky across the Pacific. People as far away as Hawaii saw the eerie glows and heard the booms. But the experiments were not without risk. One test, known as Bluegill Prime, ended in disaster. A missile carrying a nuclear warhead exploded on the launch pad, spreading radioactive material across the island. Cleanup efforts were rushed and incomplete. Contaminated soil was scraped into pits, covered with concrete, and left behind. The island became toxic, an invisible threat lurking beneath the surface. Later, Johnston Atoll became a chemical weapons storage facility. Mustard gas, VX nerve agent, and sarin were stored here in large quantities. Some of these materials were later destroyed in high-temperature incinerators, built on the island, but the process was dangerous and controversial. Workers wore full protective suits. Alarms were tested constantly. Any leak, even a small one, could be deadly. The secrecy surrounding Johnston Atoll fueled decades of speculation. Was it just a storage site, or was it also used for experiments that never made it into official reports? Some believe biological weapons were developed here. Others think it played a role in space surveillance or advanced missile defense systems. Whatever the truth, the island remains off limits. Even now, long after its military importance has waned, access is restricted. Today, Johnston Atoll is a wildlife refuge, on paper. The military presence is gone, and the island is under the control of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. but few animals live there, and fewer humans visit. The airstrip is cracked, the buildings are rusted shells, and signs still warn of contamination. Nature tries to reclaim the land, but the scars of human activity remain. What does it mean to take an island that once belonged to no one and turn it into a laboratory for warfare? What legacy is left when the danger is buried under concrete and the silence speaks louder than history? Johnston Atoll is a place of ghosts, not of people, but of purpose. Once vital, now abandoned. Once feared, now forgotten. As we leave the radioactive ruins of Johnston Atoll behind, our journey continues deeper into isolation. The next island awaits, frozen, unyielding, and locked in a grip of endless cold. A place that tests not just the body, but the soul. It's one of the most extreme environments on Earth, and only the most determined dare to explore its icy edges. We head toward the coldest, harshest place on Earth, a land where the wind howls endlessly and where no one lives not by law, but by necessity. A place so extreme, so isolated, that even the bravest explorers can only endure it for a short time. Our next island is not a mystery, but a test of human limits. There is an island so far south, so bitterly cold, and so unrelenting in its weather that even the hardiest of researchers struggle to survive there for long. This is Peter the Ferret Island, a lonely fragment of land located deep within the Bellingshausen Sea, off the coast of Antarctica. It is one of the most remote islands on Earth, rarely visited, almost never inhabited, and perpetually battered by ice, wind, and freezing waters. To reach Peter the Ferret Island is no easy feat. Ships must navigate through thick sea ice, unpredictable weather, and some of the roughest seas on the planet. Even in the summer months, the island remains encased in ice, surrounded by glaciers that calve without warning. And when the sea finally allows a landing, the cliffs and jagged rocks lining the coast make it nearly impossible to disembark safely. For much of human history, the island remained unseen. It wasn't until 1821 that a Russian explorer, Fabian von Bellingshausen, first sighted the island. But even he couldn't land. It took more than a century, until 1929, for the first recorded landing to occur, led by a Norwegian expedition. They planted a flag, stayed just long enough to claim it for Norway, and left again. Since then, only a handful of expeditions have ever returned. The island itself is a volcano, mostly dormant, but still very much alive. Beneath its ice-covered peak, Mount Lars Christensen, geothermal forces simmer. Satellite scans have shown evidence of recent activity, subtle but real. Scientists believe the island may erupt again, though when is anyone's guess? Its remote location makes it difficult to study, and harder still to monitor in real time. Peter the Ferret Island has no native wildlife, no known vegetation, and no standing structures. It's not suitable for permanent habitation, and there are no ongoing scientific bases like those seen elsewhere in Antarctica. The only visitors are occasional research teams, often part of larger polar expeditions. These teams spend a day or two collecting samples, ice cores, rock formations, and seismic data before being forced to retreat by worsening conditions. What draws people here isn't comfort or beauty, but the challenge itself, the allure of the untouched, the mystery of a land where almost no one has stood. It's a place that strips away all distraction. There are no cities, no crowds, no technology to rely on, only the wind, the ice, and the feeling of standing on the edge of the world. Some have described Peter the Ferret Island as otherworldly, a comparison that makes sense. The way its icy cliffs rise straight out of the sea, the silence that blankets everything, the pale light that never quite becomes daylight. It feels alien, like a scene from another planet. It's easy to forget, standing there, that you are still on Earth. Its isolation has also given rise to myths and theories. Some claim that deep beneath its icy crust lie secrets, ancient relics preserved in permafrost, or even hidden military installations from the Cold War era. Others suggest that its volcano might house microbial life forms, unlike any we've encountered, frozen and waiting for discovery. These are speculations, of course, but in a place this unexplored, even the most outlandish ideas gain traction. Peter the Fair Island stands as a symbol, not just of isolation, but of humanity's relentless curiosity. Despite its danger, despite its remoteness, we keep returning, not to conquer it, but to understand it, to collect fragments of knowledge from a place that refuses to be tamed. And now, as we leave behind the frozen silence of this Antarctic sentinel, we turn toward another island, warmer, but no less mysterious. An island of ancient ruins, forbidden rituals, and whispered curses. A place where stone statues watch from the hills, and the past seems forever alive. Far out in the South Pacific, thousands of miles from any major continent, lies an island that feels like the edge of the world. It is known to many as Easter Island, but its native name is Rapa Nui. This volcanic landmass is famous for its haunting stone statues, massive heads and torsos, carved centuries ago by a people whose history has largely been lost to time. These monolithic figures, called moai, stand in silent rows facing inland, as if watching over the island. Some are nearly 30 feet tall, weighing over 80 tons, and no one truly knows how they were moved or why they were made. The story of Rapa Nui is one of wonder, tragedy, and enduring mystery. Polynesians are believed to have settled here around 1200 AD, navigating thousands of miles of open ocean using stars, currents, and ancient navigation techniques. They brought with them their culture, their language, and their gods. And for a time, the island flourished. They built villages, cultivated crops, and raised the moai. Dozens, then hundreds of them, sculpted from volcanic tuff. The statues are thought to represent deified ancestors, a form of spiritual protection for the people. But the deeper purpose of the moai, and the method by which they were transported across the island's rugged terrain, remains a subject of debate. One theory suggests the statues were walked upright using a complex rope and balance system. Others believe they were laid on sledges and dragged. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but the scale of the effort remains staggering. The islanders committed generations to carving and erecting these giants, until they suddenly stopped. By the time Europeans arrived in the early 18th century, the society that had built the moai was in collapse. The island was deforested, the soil was eroded, and the once prosperous population had dwindled. Oral histories speak of civil wars, famine, and societal breakdown. The moai were toppled, the belief systems shattered. Some have interpreted this as an ecological cautionary tale, a warning about resource depletion and overpopulation. Others argue that external factors, such as introduced diseases and slave raids, played a larger role in the island's downfall. Today, Rapa Nui remains one of the most isolated inhabited islands in the world. It is technically part of Chile, but its culture and language remain distinct. The moai still stand, some restored, some lying in ruins. They are reminders of a past both glorious and grim. Yet, Rapa Nui holds more than just stone statues. Beneath its surface lie caves and tunnels, many of which have never been fully explored. Petroglyphs decorate the cliffs, depicting birds, gods, and symbols whose meanings are still debated. And then there's the Rongo Rongo script, a system of glyphs found on wooden tablets that may represent a lost written language. To this day, no one has deciphered them. Some believe Rapa Nui may have once been part of a larger landmass, now sunken beneath the sea. Others link it to the myths of Mu or Lemuria, lost continents of ancient knowledge. These theories remain speculative, but the island's isolation, its mystery, and the sheer ambition of its monuments keep the imagination alive. Easter Island is a place where silence speaks loudly, the wind rustling through the grass, the crash of waves against basalt cliffs, the watchful eyes of stone guardians staring endlessly inland. Every part of the landscape whispers that there is more to this place than history has recorded. From Rapa Nui, we travel next to an island hidden not by distance, but by law. A tropical paradise where the water is warm, the forests thick, and the past carefully concealed. A place where entry is forbidden, and where some say the echoes of past horrors still linger. In the heart of the Pacific lies an island wrapped in silence and suspicion. Once known for its turquoise waters and vibrant community, Bikini Atoll is now a place that few dare visit, a ghost of paradise turned into one of the most controversial test sites in human history. From a distance, it looks like the perfect island getaway, but beneath its surface lies the story of disruption, radiation, and an ongoing legacy of displacement. Bikini Atoll is part of the Marshall Islands, a scattered group of coral islands and atolls in the Central Pacific. For centuries, it was home to the Bikini people, who lived in harmony with the sea. They fished, grew coconuts, and passed down traditions through song and ritual. Life was slow, rhythmic, and in balance with nature. But in 1946, that balance was shattered. Following World War II, the United States sought a remote location to conduct nuclear testing. Bikini, far from major population centers and easily controlled, was chosen. American officials asked the islanders to leave temporarily, assuring them they could return after the tests. Trusting the promise, the Bikini people were relocated to a nearby island. They packed what they could, leaving behind homes, graves, and a way of life. What followed were 23 nuclear tests conducted between 1946 and 1958. Among them was Castle Bravo, detonated in 1954. It remains the most powerful nuclear weapon ever tested by the United States, over 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The explosion was far more intense than predicted. A blinding flash lit the sky. A fireball rose miles into the air, and a vast radioactive cloud spread across the region. Fallout reached not only Bikini but also neighboring atolls and inhabited islands. The residents of Rongelap and Uterik were exposed to high levels of radiation. Children developed burns. Water supplies were contaminated. Livestock died. The long-term effects were devastating: increased cancer rates, birth defects, and generational trauma that continues today. Bikini Atoll was left scarred. The land was irradiated, the coral reef shattered, and the natural ecosystem poisoned. In the decades that followed, scientists monitored the atoll closely. By the 1970s, a few Bikinian families attempted to return, believing the island safe once more. But high radiation levels remained in the soil. Coconut trees absorbed the isotopes. The land, once fertile, was now dangerous. The islanders were forced to evacuate again. Today, Bikini remains mostly uninhabited. A few caretakers and occasional divers visit the lagoon, where shipwrecks from the nuclear tests lie in eerie silence, ghosts of war preserved beneath crystal-clear waters. The island has become a strange paradox, a nuclear wasteland that nature has begun to reclaim. Birds nest among the palms, fish swim in the glowing shallows, but the danger remains. For the Bikinian people, the trauma is still fresh. Many live in exile on other islands or in the United States, separated from their homeland by invisible particles and broken promises. Legal battles for compensation and justice have stretched for decades. They were promised a temporary relocation. It became permanent. Bikini Atoll stands as a powerful symbol of the cost of progress and the ease with which entire communities can be uprooted in the name of science, strategy, or power. It reminds us that paradise can be lost in an instant, and that some wounds linger longer than the explosions that cause them. From the radioactive silence of Bikini, we travel next to a place where no human has ever lived, and where none ever will. A wind-blasted, ice-covered island claimed by no one and owned by everyone. A no man's land in the truest sense. Join us for part 13 as we arrive at the island where Earth ends and nothing begins. Amid the frigid waters off Antarctica's coast lies a place so bleak, so inhospitable, it defies the very idea of life. This is Bouvet Island, a remote speck in the South Atlantic Ocean. Often described as the most isolated island on Earth, Bouvet is a land of perpetual cold, crushing waves, and towering cliffs. It is the closest thing our planet has to a blank space, untouched, unclaimed by civilization, and virtually unreachable. Located roughly 1,100 miles from the nearest landmass, Bouvet Island belongs to Norway, though few Norwegians, or anyone for that matter, have ever set foot there. It is a sub-Antarctic volcanic island, 93% of which is covered in glaciers. With no natural harbors, no vegetation, and no permanent inhabitants, Bouvet exists on the edge of human comprehension. If Earth has an off switch, this island might be where it's buried. The weather on Bouvet is relentless. Winds howl through the jagged peaks. Snow falls year-round. The surrounding seas are so rough that ships rarely approach. And when they do, landing is nearly impossible. Sheer ice cliffs rise straight from the ocean, offering no safe entry point. For this reason, most of what we know about the island has come from satellites and the few scientific expeditions brave enough to try and study it. Despite its harshness, Bouvet has become a strange magnet for speculation. In 1964, a British research team flying overhead spotted something unexpected on the island's rocky shoreline: an abandoned lifeboat, partially buried in the ice. There were no signs of life, no footprints, no supplies, no wreckage. The boat was intact, but its origin remained unknown. When another team returned 2 years later, the lifeboat was gone. This mystery has never been solved. No missing vessels were reported in the area. No survivors were found. Some suggest it may have been the result of a classified military experiment, while others believe it could have been carried there by powerful currents and storms. But the question remains: who left a lifeboat on the most isolated island in the world? Adding to the intrigue is Bouvet's role in conspiracy lore. Its geographic location, remote, harsh, and unmonitored, makes it a favorite in tales of secret installations, clandestine experiments, and even extraterrestrial monitoring stations. While these claims remain unfounded, Bouvet's eerie silence and unearthly appearance fuel such speculation. In reality, Bouvet is monitored mostly for environmental research. A few scientific teams have installed automated weather stations, and occasional expeditions collect data on glacial movement and climate conditions. But for the most part, the island remains untouched, a white monolith surrounded by chaos. There's something deeply humbling about a place like Bouvet. In an age of satellites, internet, and constant connection, here exists a stretch of land entirely indifferent to our presence. It does not care who we are or what we want. It does not welcome. It does not warn. it simply endures, a reminder that even now, in the 21st century, there are still corners of the earth that remain completely wild. From the frozen desolation of Bouvet Island, we turn now to a place much warmer, but no less isolated, a place of myths, lost explorers, and tantalizing clues that continue to draw the curious and the brave. Join us in part 14 as we arrive at an island long whispered about in sailors' tales, a place said to hold the secret to immortality. In the legends of sailors and explorers, there exists an island where age slows, where sickness fades, and where time itself is said to unravel, a paradise shrouded in mist and mystery. This is Isla de la Juventud, the Isle of Youth, a name so steeped in myth that even its geography has been questioned. Though there is a real island in Cuba by that name, the true Isle of Youth, in global folklore, has far more elusive roots. For centuries, the idea of a magical island offering eternal youth has captivated adventurers. Stories from ancient Greece to early European exploration speak of hidden lands where waters heal and life stretches on indefinitely. These tales converged into myths like the Fountain of Youth, sought by conquistadors such as Juan Ponce de Leon. But lesser known is the island some believe he was truly searching for, not a spring on the mainland, but a verdant, elusive island lost somewhere in the Caribbean. Theories about this island's location abound. Some believe it lies in the Bahamas, near the Bimini Road, a strange underwater rock formation that some claim is evidence of ancient construction. Others suggest it exists only at certain times, visible under rare atmospheric conditions or concealed by forces unknown. Whatever the case, stories of strange sightings persist. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, ship logs described unexplained land masses appearing and disappearing on the horizon, lush green islands where none should exist. Some captains reported landing on such islands only to find no trace of them days later. Others told of stumbling upon thriving ecosystems with unusual plants and warm, mineral-rich springs that seemed to invigorate the body. The island's mythical reputation grew, especially as tales of explorers who vanished began to surface. These stories claimed entire crews had set foot on the island and chosen never to return, drawn in by its comforts or perhaps held there by something stranger. No proof was ever found, but the tales lingered. In modern times, satellite imaging and mapping have made most of the world's land masses visible. Yet still, legends persist of places that don't appear on maps, where magnetic anomalies disrupt navigation and compasses spin aimlessly. Could Isla de la Juventud be one of them? Or is it an echo from the past, a metaphor more than a destination? The Cuban Isle of Youth, once known as the Isle of Pines, adds another layer of curiosity. It has its own strange history, serving at different times as a pirate haven, a penal colony, and a re-education center during the Cold War. The landscape is dense with pine forests, hidden caves, and natural springs. While it may not promise eternal youth, it holds the spirit of secrecy and exile, an ideal mirror for the myth that shares its name. The allure of an island where time stands still remains strong, not because we believe we'll find it, but because we need to believe such places might exist, somewhere beyond the reach of satellites and science, beyond war and decay, untouched by the passage of time, an island not of land and sea, but of hope and imagination. And so, we press on, leaving behind this vision of forever to explore one last forbidden place. An island so strange, so cloaked in local superstition and geographic confusion that even today, its existence is questioned. Join us for the final chapter, part 15, as we set foot on an island that exists, if at all. only on the edge of what we think we know. For our final journey, we travel not to a place firmly planted on any map, but to a ghost of geography, an island whispered about in folklore, occasionally spotted, but never verified. This is Sandy Island, a phantom land that once appeared on maps and globes for over a century, and yet in reality does not seem to exist. Sandy Island was long thought to lie in the Coral Sea between Australia and New Caledonia. It was charted as early as the late 1800s and appeared in prestigious world atlases, official maritime navigation databases, and even Google Earth well into the 21st century. Captains planned around it, pilots avoided it, and yet no one ever really landed there. That is, until a team of Australian researchers decided to investigate. In 2012, aboard the RV Southern Surveyor, scientists set sail towards Sandy Island to study its geology and waters. What they found was open sea. No island, no reef. Just deep ocean where land was supposed to be. The researchers double-checked their coordinates. They were in the right place, down to the decimal. The island simply wasn't there. It had never been. This revelation caused a stir in both the scientific community and the wider public. How could a non-existent island end up on so many maps for so long? Some believe it was an early cartographic error, a misidentified floating pumice raft, or a volcanic gas slick, misread as land. Others suggest it was copied from one chart to another, without verification, snowballing into accepted fact. Once printed on enough maps, it became real. But then there are the stranger theories. Some suggest Sandy Island did exist, and then disappeared. Perhaps it was a sandbar that sank below the surface due to erosion or shifting tectonic activity. Others believe it may be a vanishing island, the kind referenced in Polynesian lore, land that only appears under certain celestial conditions, or once every few generations, before slipping back beneath the waves. More speculative theories propose deliberate misinformation. Could Sandy Island have been a fabrication by governments or navies, used as a marker for navigation, espionage, or secret routes? Some even draw parallels with the concept of hyperstitions, ideas or places that become real simply through belief and repetition. Regardless of its origins, Sandy Island serves as a profound reminder. We don't know everything about our world. In an age of satellites, GPS, and global data, there are still gaps, still ghosts in the machine. It's a modern myth wrapped in coordinates and pixels. Today, Sandy Island has been removed from most maps. Google Earth erased it. Navigation databases corrected the error, but traces remain on antique globes, in archived documents, and in the memories of those who once believed in a speck of land floating in the Coral Sea. And that's what makes it the perfect place to end our journey. A place that is defined not by its presence, but by its absence. A story that reminds us that even as we chart every inch of the earth, the unknown persists. That sometimes the greatest mysteries are not what we find, but what we expect to find and never do. So whether it's a radioactive atoll, a volcano beneath the sea, or an island that may never have existed, these places stir something ancient within us. A need to explore, a yearning to understand, and an acceptance that we may never have all the answers. Thank you for joining us on this voyage through the world's most isolated and forbidden islands. Sleep well, dream wide, and remember, there are still places out there that lie just beyond the edge of the map.